It's Saturday, December 9th, and I'm back at it here at the shop. You know, I wish I could report I got everything done that was on my list from last Saturday, but not so. I had some interruptions, okay? But first off, I can report that my wood finishing worked out just fine. You know, the next day, Sunday, I actually sanded and stained those boards. And then this week, I was up at this building site for about 4 days working on the siding, and we were using those particular boards to trim around the windows like you can see here. But it was cold up there. Oh man, it was really cold. And I have to admit, I'm getting old enough that I don't like really being cold that much. So it's kind of nice to roll into the shop here today on Saturday morning and get back at it. Now, the number one priority today is to rebuild 2 of these SLS self-leveling suspension hydraulic pumps. You know, we do rebuild these. In fact, I rebuilt these here in the shop, and we offer them to our customers. These are getting harder and harder to find. They're no longer available new. So it's kind of a turkey shoot for me, because a lot of times you'll get a used one and it's no good. I mean, take a look at this one. You've probably seen a picture like this before where somebody advertised on eBay, oh, I got this good pump, you know, it came off a running engine. Well, just because it came off a running engine doesn't mean that it's any good. So I have to be very particular when I get these and overhaul them. Now, I'm going to put a link in the show more below this video to show you some of the other videos I've done on the SLS pump. But what am I finding? The same thing I always find. Hardened O-rings. This is the number one reason why about every 15 years you need to open up these pumps and reseal them, because these O-rings, they get hard. They get so hard that you'll actually break them like that. See that? You can just break away because they become like cement. So I've got them in the cleaning solution, all the key components. I'm doing a thorough inspection. This is probably going to take a couple hours to rebuild these. But I really want to get back on Fritz, and I want to get back on my 4.5. You know, to get them out on the road, I keep running into little things I want to do. Not necessarily are they things that must be done, but you know, it's warm in here, I'm already here, so this is what I've been doing. So what's happening with Fritz today? If you recall from one of those early videos, I found a major problem with this distributor cap. There's a bunch of marks and scoring from the rotor hitting these contact points. This thing hadn't been mounted properly. So I was able to locate a new distributor cap. Look at the difference between these two. I also got a new rotor, so we're going to be installing that today. But I think I got a little carried away. Let me explain. In order to get Fritz running again, I've got to reinstall the battery tray. And the battery, you remember when I removed this was really ugly. Well, look at how well this cleaned up. You know, I've got a few places here where I'm going to coat these rusty parts with Miracle Paint. But if I take this plastic cover off, look, I have just a small amount of rust on the sway bar and no rust out anywhere on this bracket. If you've got a 126 or 123 that has a rust problem in this area, that's a big issue. But I think I've kind of lucked out. I don't have any rust through here. I'm going to coat these parts up with Miracle Paint, and then I got to fix the battery tray. So you see how I get sidelined. Well, this has got to be done at some point, you know. So I decided to go ahead and clean this up. And when I had my cleaning solutions out and everything, that's when I got a little carried away. So I decided to go ahead and detail out the engine compartment. Now, I know this has nothing to do with how well this engine is going to run, but you know how I feel about detailing. I just couldn't help myself. Well, you can see here that the left headlight is still out, you know, and with the headlight out, I decided, oh, why not? Let's clean everything up here. So this is turning out to be a really nice looking engine compartment. As I said, even if it doesn't run, it's going to look pretty for seconds. You may be curious to know how I'm coming on the 4.5. Well, earlier today, I finished installing the new chain and reconnected it. And look at this old chain here. Now, I'm going to do a video in a couple of days. I'm going to lay this out on the bench, pull it out, and then collapse it. And let's measure just how much stretch I had in the old chain here. But this is the point where, when installing a new chain, it gets a little suspenseful. So just a few minutes ago, I completed what I call rolling the engine through and double checking everything. And using my very special wrench here, I rotated the engine over, got it up on top dead center on number 1 cylinder, and take a look at the cam marks. We're looking at the left one here, and now we're looking at the right one. They're both on the money. You know how happy I am when that happens? Well, if you put a new chain in and you do this, and I recommend you always do this, you know, if you've really screwed up, you're going to have the piston hitting the valve and you won't even be able to turn the engine over. But you may bring the marks up and they may be off a little bit. It probably means you skipped a tooth or two when you were installing the new chain. So I've shot a video. It's going to be included with my manual and my chain replacement kit for these older V8s. And I discuss what you're going to have to do. You don't have to panic, but you do have to spend a considerable amount of time to fix this problem. But you don't have to pull the chain back out, all right? But it happens, and it happens more often than I think people are willing to admit. So it's just another reason why you have to be so very, very careful when rolling a new chain into this V8. Now, I'm going to continue to turn the engine over. The spark plugs are out, both valve covers are off. So I'm going to use this opportunity to go ahead and adjust the valves. Remember, up to about 1976 on these V8s, the valves were adjustable. You had to adjust the valve clearances. After that, they went to hydraulic lifters. But I have to show you my special wrench. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Have you seen a ratchet like that? Well, this is what I use to get on that front crank bolt. I'm doing a separate video on this wrench and why I use this type of wrench when I'm doing these type of jobs on these older engines. And I'll put a link below in the show more part of this video. So, you know, I don't know how much more time I'm going to be able to spend on the 4.5 today, but I'm going to get the feeler gauges out and my special socket, and we're going to double check the clearances on all these valves. And oh, by the way, look at that. No more sloppy chain. I can't even hardly budge it off the top of both the right and left cam sprockets. On the way out to the shop this morning, I had to stop by the paint store to pick up some touch-up paint. How many of you have had to stop by the paint store on a Saturday morning? So I'm sitting here trying to detail out my siding. And you're thinking, well, Kent, why are you painting the cracks? Oh boy, not a bad color match. This is a tough thing to match. You know, we looked at 4 or 5 different colors, but you kind of need to know a little bit about this siding to understand why I'm doing this. Take a look at this. What do you think that is? Is that cedar siding? Is it, you know, some other wood product? No. Can you believe it? This is hardy siding, cement board siding that is specially coated and baked in an oven by a company called Woodtone. Let me tell you, this is really an amazing product, and it's an amazing look, particularly on the log cabin I'm building. Now, you got to remember, I'm building in a very, very high moisture environment. It's just wet up there all the time during the winter. And I want to make sure that the siding isn't going to require a lot of maintenance. And, you know, I looked at all kinds of different wood products, you know, and you say, oh, you got to use wood, dude, because, you know, you're building a log cabin. But when I saw this product, I said, oh boy. And let me tell you, when you get this lapped up on the side and you get away from it from a distance, it actually almost gives it a rounded look because of the shadow lines, and it kind of looks like logs. So over the past 3 weeks, we've been putting this siding up. The horizontal siding has gone on most all the lower surfaces, some of the upper surfaces. But on the peaks, I wanted to use hardy shingles. Now, if any of you have done any hardy siding, you know about hardy shingles, but does that look like your normal hardy shingle? I didn't want painted siding. Of course I didn't want that, but look at the coating and the color rendition on this. It's quite amazing. But one thing I was really concerned about is that the back sides of these hardy shingles is not painted. You can look here and you can see just a little bit of the yellow primer coming through these grooves, but that, to me, that's not enough because you've got this overlap sitting on top of the next panel, and with all that moisture getting in there, I bet over time in this wet environment you'll see leaching. Now remember, the walls get wet even when it isn't raining on them. Oh, you understand? So that moisture causes leaching. You'll get that whitish lime, chemical coming out below the shingles. So I'm painting all the backs of these. Now, the other issue is that you can look into these grooves and you can see the yellow primer. Look at the edges there, you can see a little bit of yellow, so you're probably thinking, Kent, this is a little extreme, but it's not only the color. I want to make sure that I get a good seal because moisture is the killer of hardy siding, if you don't already know that. And I want to make sure these edges here are really sealed. I've got probably one of the best paints available with a mildewcide in it, okay? So, I'm not going to take any chances. So I'm going to be going over all these with paint brushes and painting the grooves and painting the edges. So this won't get done this Saturday, but I got a crew coming up to the site next week, and about 3 of us will be painting all these hardy shingles on the backside and carefully detailing the grooves. My goal today wasn't to come out to the shop to paint a bunch of hardy boards, but I did need to meet one goal, and that was to find the right color and to find the right way to apply this. Now I bought a couple different types of paint brushes, and going into this groove here is kind of tough because it's so rough. It's such a rough surface. And if you get in there with a heavy brush, of course, it's going to run out the front, and then you're going to spend a lot of time wiping the front. But what I found works best are these foam brushes with this real sharp tip, and all I'm doing is dabbing. If I were to stroke back and forth on those hardy edges with the sharp cement fibers, it'd just tear the foam up. But I had good success, and I'm really happy with how this came out. Take a close look here. I've done these first 3, and you can see the grooves and this edge here, and you can see just how well this color matches. So I think once we get the system set up, we'll paint the backs first, let that dry, and then come back in and do these grooves with the foam brushes. But I'm going to need some help to do that. So I'm just going to set this aside now. I'm happy with what my goal was for today. We'll set this board aside. And now we have to tackle another problem. Right here, batteries. I have 2 AGM batteries that are on the Fritz. No, they're not in Fritz, they're on the Fritz. And one of them was in a car that I've had on charge for a long time, and of course, I believe in these battery tenders or trickle chargers. And sure enough, the cord got bumped and it came unplugged. So last week when I went out there, and oh no, a very expensive AGM battery sitting in a car for 2-3 months, because these newer cars do pull a drain even when they're parked. So I went out and I tried to put the charger on this battery right here, and nothing happened. And then there was another car with an AGM battery that was, kind of acting weird. There were some electrical things going on in the car, and I checked that battery with my tester, and it wasn't up to full charge. And then I went and put my charger on it, and it wasn't taking a charge. So I'm attacking AGM restoration today, okay? Now I've got a video I shot. I may have success on one battery. I don't know about this one. When I hook the tester up to this one, I don't even get a light, not even, a bad or anything else. There's nothing. Usually you get a low indicator, but there's nothing in this battery. So can I restore this AGM battery? Can I restore the other one? Well, we're going to find out over this next week. And I've already shot a video earlier today on the other car, and we're going to let that sit overnight, and we'll report back on that. Now, if you're watching this video, these other videos won't be available for 3 or 4 days, because I want to go through the whole process on both batteries, how I'm going to try to restore them, and then I'll post on YouTube. So if you're looking at this Saturday episode within a couple days after it was filmed, these battery videos won't be up yet, but I'll also put a link with all the videos I've done on battery maintenance. Now, as the day winds down, it's about 5 o'clock, and I haven't had any fun yet. So there's just one more thing I want to do before I head for home. I was hoping that sometime today I'd get a little time to work on that Spitfire, but it's not looking too good for model airplanes. Maybe the only time I'm going to find to work on these is when I retire. But I want to share this with you. I'm not going to be able to play with it much more than look at it. Sometimes that's all I have time to do is just open up the boxes and look at the models. But I go way back with airplanes and way back with model airplanes. And about 2 weeks ago, this friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, Kent, I want to give you this model. I have a model that my wife gave me in 1985. And look what he gave me. This is a scale model of a Beechcraft Bonanza. Now, this was an airplane that he owned for a number of years and used in his business. And I'm kind of sentimental to this airplane too, because I got my instrument rating in a Beechcraft Bonanza. But this is kind of a unique model. This is an old school model, okay? For those of you who are currently in the hobby or messing around with model airplanes, you've got it really easy, because back in the late 80s when I got into model airplanes, I had to build everything from scratch. I'm going to open up this box and show you what's inside, and then you're going to probably understand why I'll have to wait till I retire before I can build this one. Now, before I open up this box, you've got to understand that that Spitfire that you saw last week came pre-made. That's right, pre-made, pre-painted. I basically got to bolt it together and put some decals on it and then get it all set up for my radio and it's ready to fly. But take a look at this one, circa the 1980s. Guess what's in here? Well, there's your instructions, and you can see how scale that is if you're aware of Bonanzas. But look at all the details, all the building details. It just goes on and on and on. Fortunately, there's foam wings that are scale, and these have to be sheeted with balsa wood. That's right, you sheet the foam with balsa, and then you sand it smooth. And then I have all these pieces of balsa in here that just kind of goes on and on. I do have a plastic formed cowling and a plastic formed cockpit so I can get cutouts for the windows. So look at all this balsa, all this wood, all these little pieces that have to be cut, sanded, and then it's got to be finished. Okay, so I love looking at old models like this. I'm actually collecting some of these old balsa models because they're just not made anymore. Everything comes, you know, pre-made, ready to go. That's kind of the nature of the world we live in. So I'm going to set this aside. I'll take good care of it. But at least in the immediate future, you won't be seeing me working on this one here. So I'm going to package this up. I got to shut everything down here now and head for home because I'm not done yet. Now I got to go edit videos.